Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Selling Greenville, your favorite real estate podcast here in Greenville, South Carolina. I'm your host, as always, Stan McCune, realtor right here in lovely Greenville, South Carolina. You can find all of my contact information in the show notes if you need to reach out to me for any of your real estate needs. And just a reminder, as always, you can also reach out to Piper Insurance Group for your home, auto, and umbrella insurance needs. They're our sponsor for this show. So please reach out to them for a free quote. They're an independent insurance agency, so they can quote multiple different insurance companies, give you the best possible quote, best possible coverage that you could imagine. And that's in multiple states, not just South Carolina, also North Carolina and Georgia for our friends who invest in those cities, or those states, I should say. And including, of course, as I just alluded to, investment properties as well. They can help with fix and flips, rentals, ground up new construction, all of those good things. So please reach out to them. Contact info in the show notes. And if you like the show, listen, guys, I don't ask for much. Please hit the like button, subscribe, leave a little review, leave a comment on YouTube. Come on now. Come on, it doesn't take you that long. If you're getting something out of this, particularly if you're a realtor, right? You're never going to use me as your real estate agent. Come on. Come on. If you're an appraiser, come on. Just hit that little, smash that button. Show me some love, all right? I want to get a little bit of, I'm not feeling loved at the moment. I need to feel a little bit loved by y'all. So please do that. And yeah, I'd really appreciate that. So one policy I have on this podcast and in my communications with my clients in general is that I tell people what I believe to be true, even if it's not what they want to hear, right? I'm not the prophet that just tells people, okay, here's what you want to hear. I'm going to itch your ears a little bit and tell you that everything is hunky-dory. No, sometimes things are not hunky-dory. And unfortunately, when it comes to sellers right now in today's market, the truth has been that for a little bit now, this is not a seller's market, okay? At least not in the Greenville-Spartanburg area, okay? Real estate is hyper local. There are going to be some markets where it's a buyer's market, some markets where it's a seller's market, and you get everything in between. But in the Greenville-Spartanburg area, it is not a seller's market by any stretch, okay? Now, you'll hear people reference various statistics to try to say, well, actually, based on supply and demand numbers, sorry for that terrible accent, I don't know where that accent came from. I'm going to stop that right now. Actually, based on supply and demand numbers or months of inventory, which is the proper way of looking at supply and demand in real estate, it is still a seller's market. You'll hear people make that argument. And I think at the moment, those people are just wrong, okay? Like, I'm just going to call a spade a spade. I don't think that they're correct. Now, that could change very quickly if mortgage rates come down and all of a sudden we get a bunch of buyers entering the market. That could flip it back to a seller's market. But those saying it's still a seller's market based on inventory numbers, in my opinion, are being misled by the inventory numbers because, as I've said in previous episodes, we've had 5 straight months of year-on-year price declines. That doesn't happen in a seller's market. It doesn't. Now, by the way, I just kind of moved my hair out of my eye. If you're watching on YouTube, you get a rare look right now at what I look like with no product in my hair. I just came out of the shower not too long ago after working out. I'm recording this late, really late. It's had a long day. It's after 10 p.m. on Sunday night. But if you don't know, I'm having work done on my house. Contractors here all day long. I can't record this podcast anywhere else. At least I don't have it quickly set up anywhere else. So I'm trying to make this work for you guys, okay? Don't make fun of me. Actually, go ahead. Make fun of me. If that makes you comment, absolutely. Make fun of my air-dried hair that has no product in it because I just stepped out of the shower not too long ago. And also, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see that I need to silence my phone. Okay, just did that. All right. Okay. So, back to... Oh, and also, if you're watching on YouTube, you might love my hair. But there's not going to be a whole lot else besides my face on this episode. I'm not going to be sharing my screen, showing data or anything like that. I'm just going to be talking. So you don't need to worry about missing out on anything if you're one of those. Just keep listening and watch something else. Scroll on social media while you're listening or do whatever it is that you want to do. All right. So What does it mean then if prices are going down? As I just said, that we now have 5 months of data that indicates that's happening, but months of inventory isn't skyrocketing like it normally would when a market shifts to a buyer's market. Here's my opinion. I think it means a few things. First off, there aren't nearly as many sellers entering the market as there would be if they were confident that they could get a good price for their home. So the supply side of the inventory dynamic is depressed right now, keeping the months of inventory lower than it would be in a normal market. Sellers are aware. They're seeing what's happening. Okay? And by the way, the rental market is also kind of constrained as well. So people that might normally would sell and then go rent, they don't have very many options either. So it's not a good market for many people right now. And so that's one dynamic. Okay? The supply side is depressed more than you would expect it to be. But additionally, I would say that those who are a part of that supply side, right? The sellers who actually are selling, right? Not just sitting on the sidelines. Generally speaking, they have to sell, right? They have a reason. There's a reason why they are taking the risk of selling during a market that has been depressed and that's showing signs of depression, is because they are being forced one way or another to sell, including potentially at a loss if necessary, which is something we'll be talking about in this episode here in a bit, although I'm going to build up to it. And if, in case you're thinking about this, yes, downstream from these two things is another reality that foreclosures could start to become an issue if this dynamic doesn't change, although it's too early for us to talk about foreclosures right now because default numbers are still very low. We're not seeing a lot of foreclosures. But if sellers start to lose home value for a long period of time, foreclosures will happen. That is how it works, okay? So obviously, you'll be the first ones to know. You're listening to this podcast. You're educated people. I try to educate you, but you probably are also getting educated through other means if you're listening to this podcast on the market. You'll be the first ones to know. I will let you know if nobody else does, if we're starting to see foreclosures enter the market. Okay, now, here's what I keep personally running into, okay? I keep running into personally past clients who bought their homes in 2022 to 2023, maybe even 2024, who are now in 2025 looking to sell. Now, in a normal market, for the most part, that's no problem, right? Particularly those who bought in 22 and 23. Those who bought in 2024, a little dicey, even in a normal market. But usually prices rise in the greater Greenville area at a compounded 3 to 5% per year. That would be kind of the norm, roughly speaking. And so after 2 to 3 years, you've got plenty of equity, right? Unless you just made a really, really bad choice, just really overpaid. You've got some equity after a couple of years. Okay, hold that thought. Before I go further, I want to say one thing, okay? Unless you are a really savvy real estate buyer who really approaches every real estate transaction as an investment, even the purchasing of your own primary residence, my advice is that you should never, ever assume that your home will appreciate while you're living in it if you live in it for fewer than 2 years, okay? Unless you have really approached that primary residence purchase as an investment, or unless, the other caveat, you put a ton of work into the home. That's the other possibility. Almost, if you almost treated the home like a flip, for instance, or if you did big additions to it, or who knows what. Obviously, those are exceptions. But generally speaking, you buy a home, there is no guarantee that it's going to go up in value within a year or two. Okay, and I've said this before on my show that real estate goes up in value over time. And there is an incredible amount of data to support this. That's not my opinion. That is market-wide, Greenville-Spartanburg market, but also in the United States as a whole. And even you go to other countries, this is the case. There's a lot of factors behind it. But the market does appreciate over time. But when we say over time, that doesn't mean that it goes up in value every day or every month or even every year. Real estate, like the stock market, has down markets that typically don't last more than a couple years, but you can easily get stuck in one if you try to sell a home less than 2 years after buying it. Well, guess what? The Federal Reserve created a down market that started in 2022 by raising rates. They thought by now, and they've made this clear, that we'd be out of the thick of it and they'd be able to start to taper rates back down. Well, they did start tapering rates back down, but then they stopped, right? Because the inflation data, the labor data wasn't the way they wanted it to be. And so guess what? Mortgage rates are still more than double what they were in 2021. Translation, we are in now year 3 of a down market, and this is finally starting to show up in the data, as we've already discussed, and it's been pretty clear that some neighborhoods have gone down in value recently. We've already talked about all that, so I'm not going to rehearse all of that. But it's good to consider for all this. I want to make sure that people understand, okay? I want to make sure that people understand what I'm saying when I'm talking about home values and not feeling like, well, I heard and Stan said that home values always go up. Consistently, again, the data says that home values as a whole, they do go up, but I'm talking over the course of many, many years. I'm not talking about every year, okay? That's an important distinction. Now, this is a very long, this stretch of 5 straight months of year-on-year declines is unusual for Greenville. We don't see that too often. Usually it's during a big recession that we would have something like that. So that is interesting, okay? And obviously that's something that we'll continue to track and see at what point we turn the corner on that. But these are all things that I want you guys to keep in mind so you don't feel like I've misled you on any level, okay? So with all that in mind, if you bought in 2022 or later and you want to sell this year, you need to be honest with yourself. If you didn't make major improvements to your home, or if you didn't get just a really great deal on it when you bought it, the reality is your home may not be worth what you bought it for, especially if you bought new construction, which a ton of people, including a ton of my clients, did from 2022 to 2024 due to the builders offering these great promo rates, 4.99%, 3.99% when all the other mortgage rates were so much higher. A lot of people were just like, yeah, I don't really have a choice. I mean, I've got to do that. I can't afford anything else. And so a lot of people bought new construction that normally wouldn't. But they are more exposed to this phenomenon of their home potentially being worth less than what they bought it for than people that bought resales. Why? Why new construction? Why is that uniquely a problem in this dynamic? Well, first off, if you tried to sell your already lived-in home before your neighborhood has finished construction, good luck. Okay? Did you like that? I went right into the microphone and said good luck. Good luck. Okay? Nobody wants to buy a used car for the same price as a new one. And the same is true for houses. In fact, I've had this choice multiple times. I've had instances where my wife's vehicle, we were looking at used vehicles, and a dealer that we went to was like, what if I could give you a brand new version of this that has all the same features for the same price as the used one that you're looking at? And we're like, well, yeah, we'd look at it. And he was able to deliver that, and we ended up buying a brand new vehicle that we never expected to purchase because used vehicle prices were expensive. It literally was the same price. Like, they were able to come down. It wasn't listed as the same price, but they were able to come down and match the price. It was incredible. Same thing for homes, right? You're presented with, oh, I can have a brand new home or an identical home that's already lived in, and the price is no different. That's a no-brainer, okay? But what about once the neighborhood is already out of phase, meaning the construction is complete? All the homes have been built. They've all been sold. The builder is gone. Well, often new construction does appreciate as the same rate as more established neighborhoods. And there's a lot of reasons for this. Okay, I'm not going to get into all of them, but just to rattle off a few. New construction, it doesn't really compete with resales, right? When it's first being built. For the same reason I just kind of explained. When people are looking for a home, they don't typically start by looking at new construction, right? They typically start by looking at resales. But then when they see the new construction options, well, okay, I'm going to buy that. But from the builder's perspective, they're not really competing with the resales, because at the end of the day, the people that are buying the new construction product, they were never going to buy a resale to begin with, right? There are reasons why they pivoted in the new construction direction, a whole lot of reasons. But once the new construction becomes a resale, right? It's been lived in, and now the person who bought it for the first time is now going to sell it for the second time. Well, now you're competing against a much wider market, right? You are competing now. That resale home is competing with all of these other resales that are out there. Hope that makes sense. That was a little bit clunky the way I said it. But basically, the builders, they're not competing with the resales a whole lot. Whereas once your new construction that you bought, then you go to list it, you are now competing with all the homes that are on the market. And you have to keep that in mind. And the reality is that you're competing with all these other resales that might be in more established communities. And it takes communities, particularly new construction ones, a while to form an identity. There's trees and plants that need to grow. The HOA needs to be formed once the builder gets out. And it might take the HOA a while to get their footing. First-time home buyers who bought new construction in record numbers, as I already said, the past few years, may not have kept up with their homes in the way that you would expect because they're first-time home buyers. They might not have as much money to keep up with their homes. Who knows? It can cause neighborhoods to go from new construction to not looking very good really, really fast. Okay, so it's just a lot of factors that potentially negatively impact the home values in newer communities, particularly the cheaper priced newer communities. And of course, there's one that I didn't mention, a nasty one that nobody wants to talk about, which is that some builders the past year or so started lowering their prices. Okay, guess what happened to all of those who bought their home, their new construction home, when prices were at their peak, and then the home builder, after they made those purchases, started lowering the prices for the exact same home to new buyers? The home builder essentially just depreciated all the people that had bought homes in that neighborhood, depreciated all the homes that had been sold in that neighborhood up to that point. And yes, in case you're wondering, this isn't just a theoretical exercise. This has happened in the greater Greenville area, and I've seen in many instances of it in the upstate. And it feels like something that should be unethical, but nevertheless, real estate is quite capitalistic, and these things happen. Not a ton of oversight when it comes to home builder practices on pricing. And so that's a really nasty thing, right? You buy your house for $300,000, new construction, and then, a year later, the home builder is selling the exact same home for $275,000 to someone else. Horrible, horrible, right? It will take you years to recover that value. That's just the reality of the situation. Okay. That being said, okay, the resale of homes, okay, just in general, okay, not just new construction, okay, resales of homes that have been owned for fewer than 3 years are a problem right now. In fact, I pulled some data on this. Here's what I did. You guys know I love data. I took a random sampling of homes that were bought since 2023 and sold again since then. I scrubbed the data of homes that looked like flips, since those aren't what I'm talking about, right? Good flippers, they can figure out the inefficiencies in the market, and they can add value to homes that allow them to sell at a profit later on. I try to get those out. Then I looked at what the home was bought for, and then subtracted what it sold for, including any concessions that the seller was forced to pay. Okay? Hopefully that all makes sense there. Basically, we've got homes that were bought and then since 2023 and then sold, plus when they were sold, I'm factoring in that if the seller paid concessions to the buyer, basically helped the buyer out with their closing costs. Okay. And this was a random sampling, by the way. This is not every single home in the market, okay? I took a random sampling. So what was the result? The result is that 15.63% of the homes I sampled sold for less than they were bought for, okay? So the 15.63% of sellers since 2023 who sold their home that they had also bought since 2023 sold for a loss. Now, that doesn't sound too bad, right? But That's a massive number, 15.63%. That's a massive number in comparison to previous years when basically nobody was selling for less than they bought for. Okay? Huge increase from 0 to 15.3%. But there was a really important data point that was hidden from all of this. And that is all of the seller's closing costs, which can be really, really substantial, right? See, when I'm looking at the multiple listing service, I can see what the seller conceded to the buyer for the buyer's closing costs, but the multiple listing service doesn't show us all that the seller paid, including, of course, realtor compensation, broker fees. That's not revealed in the multiple listing service intentionally for a variety of reasons. Mainly that it could spur a lawsuit from the Department of Justice that we're trying to do price fixing or something, which, of course, we're not trying to do. But I can't see that. I can't see all of the fees that a seller has paid. But the good thing is that we can make some reasonable assumptions, right? Standard seller closing costs are somewhere between 6 to 7% of the sale price, including broker fees, attorney fees, prorations, etc., etc. Now, there are a variety of ways that these fees could be lower than 6 to 7%. But the vast majority will end up in that range. And so it's safe to assume that most, if not all, of my sample ended up paying that on top of what they sold the home for, right? And so let's overlay these numbers, right? With the assumption that the sellers paid 7% towards closing costs. And mind you, that one thing I did not factor into these equations was how much they paid on closing costs, inspection fees, appraisals, etc. when they purchased the home, which in many cases would be between $5,000 to $10,000 on top of the purchase price. So really, these calculations are conservative because every buyer pays more than the mere cost of the home, and I only base calculations off of the purchase price, okay? So when I'm comparing what they bought the home for what they sold the home for, really the amount of money that they made is less than what I came up with. And if they lost money, they lost most likely even more money, unless the seller paid for all of their closing costs when they bought the home. Hopefully that makes sense. Let me know if it doesn't make sense. I'm doing the best that I can here with all these abstract numbers and equations. Okay, so once you add that 7% expense in, you come up with very different numbers. Now, a whopping 56.25% of sellers who bought the past 2 years ended up selling for a loss, over half. And again, as I just said, that's a conservative number that doesn't factor in the fact that they probably had to pay thousands of dollars of additional fees when they bought their home in the first place. If I made those additional assumptions, right, that they paid $5,000 to $10,000, then when they purchased the home, then actually this number balloons to over 70%. Over 70% of sellers who bought their home the past 2 years and sold since then sold for a loss. Insane numbers. I'm going to run with the 56.25% number because I feel like that is a more accurate, a more data-centric number than the others that have all those assumptions baked in. But you get the point. The 56.25 number is probably conservative at the end of the day. Okay, so how much money did these sellers lose? Well, that's a great question, and I've got the answer for you. On average, they lost $8,317 from what they bought for to what they sold for. However, that number is skewed by a multi-million-dollar home that sold for a massive loss, which, by the way, is more common than you might realize. When multi-million-dollar homes, they sometimes will end up being sold for hundreds of thousands less than what they were bought for. And it's nice, right? When you're a gazillionaire and you can absorb a $500,000 loss and just be like, well, at least I don't have the home anymore, right? Most of us can't do that. So that average, that $8,317 loss, that's skewed by that number. So what about the median? Well, the median loss, I think, is more reflective of what actually happened. And that was the median for this entire sample that I took lost $2,597, basically $2,600 from their purchase price to what they sold their home for, including the assumed fees that I already discussed. that's not great. Okay. Now, the silver lining is that losing $2,600 as a result of you being forced to sell your home sooner than you thought you would, and you're doing that during a slumping market. Okay, that's not the worst thing in the world, right? And I know of some markets where, excuse me, I know of some markets where sellers are having to take on, not in the Greenville-Spartanburg area, but some markets outside of South Carolina where I see sellers having to take on $50,000 losses or more to sell homes they bought just a few years ago. So $2,600, it's terrible when you lose money on a home that you're selling that you've owned for a year or two. But again, as I've already said, you're not guaranteed appreciation every single year, and it could be worse. But nobody wants to hear that, right? Nobody wants to hear that they have to lose money to get out of their home. They've been told their whole lives that the American dream is to buy a home and then sell for a profit and then buy another one and keep going like that, building wealth over time via primary residences gaining value. That is a big investment strategy for a huge, huge portion of Americans. And so, as I said before, over time, that has proven to be consistently true, but we are in a pocket right now, a down market where those who bought the past couple of years cannot assume that they can just turn around and sell for a profit now, okay? They might have to wait for the market to turn back, okay? Which it will at some point. It will. We don't know when. Again, so much comes down to these mortgage rates, but it will at some point. So over half of these people who bought since 2023 are now selling homes for a loss. And no silver lining will overcome that reality. That being said, okay, I don't want to end on a negative note. That being said, if you are one of those wanting to know if your home you purchased the past couple of years has gained value, I will be brutally honest with you about it. I'll look at the data and I'll tell you, I think you could sell and make money. I think you could sell and break even, or if you sell right now, you're going to lose money. Okay. I'll let you know. I will break it down in the simplest way possible. Or if you want a very detailed breakdown, I can do that too. Literally today. Okay. It's Sunday. I work 7 days a week. Literally today, I had not one, but 2 conversations with sellers about this. Sellers that were my buyer clients that bought within the past few years. Now they're looking to sell, and both, what do you know? New construction buyers now trying to resell, and it's going to be a struggle. Okay. It's going to be a struggle. The way I approach my business, I hate surprises. I don't want my clients to be surprised by the market. I don't even like good surprises. No surprises, right? So I'm always honest about these sorts of things, because what I don't want is to go through all of the work of listing a home, and then the market tells my client that they're not going to make any money on the home. And now my client's angry at me. No. I have those conversations up front. And of the 2 people I talked to today, one of them I told him, you are going to, there's nothing in the data that indicates that you will do better than losing upwards of $20,000 to $30,000 if you sold your home under current market conditions. I hate saying that, Now, thankfully, this person is not a forced seller, okay? Not someone that got a new job out of state, not someone that got divorced or had someone die or whatever and now has to move. Thank goodness. This person is in a situation where they can wait a little bit. They were just ready to move on from that home. And unfortunately, without selling for a loss, they can't. And that's just the reality of the situation today. I'm also having to do more pre-listing appraisals than I've ever had to do, because sellers don't want to be, they don't want to come to grips with the reality of the way the market is, right? They want to believe that their home has gained a ton of value. What are you saying that it hasn't gained that much value? Well, I'm not just saying that just to make people feel bad. I wish I could be, this super optimistic person all the time, just be like, oh yeah, your home has gained every home's gained a ton of value. unfortunately, I look at the data, and unfortunately, I've been doing this for 9 years now, and I know what the market is doing, and the market is not doing good things for sellers right now, and I have to communicate that, right? And I will communicate that. So if you're one of those, you're curious. Honestly, if you're just curious about, well, what is my home worth today? You're not even looking at selling. You know what? I don't mind those. I don't mind doing that research for you and actually looking into that for you. Hit me up. My contact information is in the show notes. Now, if you're one of those that you're just wanting to know for curiosity's sake, please give me the heads up on that, because I've got people that need me for like actual real life stuff, right? They're actually wanting to buy or sell a home. So that doesn't mean that I'll ignore your request. It just means that it's not going to be my number one thing, right? As opposed to someone that calls me up and is like, hey, Stan, I want to sell my home next week. That becomes priority numero uno. Ooh, my Spanish is rough. Numero uno, for yours truly. But I am more than happy to look into your home value, even if you're not looking at selling, you're just curious. Hit me up. Contact info in the show notes. Piper Insurance Group, also in the show notes. Reach out to them for a free quote today. And please, guys, this is good data, right? Are you getting this from anywhere else? Show a little love. Leave a little comment on YouTube. Talk about my hair. Whatever it is that you want to do. I will even respond to that if you do, okay? Like, rate, review, subscribe. Make sure you don't miss future episodes. And we will talk again next time.